Hello, students. So we are going to be now starting a new unit in social studies. We just finished the early humans. So now we're moving on to unit two, which is Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Kush. We're probably not going to cover Kush this year, but we are going to cover Mesopotamia and Egypt. So right now I am on page 51 right now. So this just kind of gives a little preview of the unit and what you will learn. So I'm going to go ahead and read that. I'm on page 51 in your book. It says, the world's first civilizations developed in Asia and Africa after people learned how to farm. These civilizations began in river valleys, which were perfect places for people to grow crops. With the development of farming, people no longer had to travel in search of food. Instead, they could settle down in one place. Eventually, people built the first towns and cities and invented government, writing, and the wheel. They also created huge buildings and temples and produced incredible works of art. In the next three chapters, you will learn about the early civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Kush. So I'm just going to scroll down to a couple pages, and I want to just go ahead and jump right into the first section, or the first, yeah, I guess the first section, which is on page 56. Okay, it's called Geography and the Fertile Crescent. All right. So if on the left hand side it says what you will learn, let me just kind of talk about what you will learn. It says the main ideas: the rivers of Southwest Asia supported the growth of civilization. New farming techniques led to the growth of cities. And the big idea is the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were the site of the world's first civilizations. And some of the key terms we have are fertile crescent, silt, irrigation, canals, surplus, and division of labor. So you'll need to know those definitions for this section. Okay, and as always, every section starts out with a little if you were there question. It says, you were a farmer in Southwest Asia about 6,000 years ago. You live near a slow-moving river with many shallow lakes and marshes. The river makes the land in the valley rich and fertile, so you can grow wheat and dates. But in the spring, raging floods spill over the riverbanks, destroying your fields. In the hot summers, you are often short of water. How can you control the waters of the river? So, what this section and a lot of the future civilizations we're going to study, they talk about how the civilizations sort of popped up along rivers. And I think you guys could probably make a lot of good inferences about why that was. Like, why would people want to live near a river? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and we're going to kind of study those. So, how do you think they controlled the waters of the river? So, if it's too high and it's destroying things, how could they keep the water from flooding everything in those hot months and everything dries up? How do they keep how do they still maintain a water supply for everybody and their crops? So that's another thing we're going to explore. All right, building background. In several parts of the world, bands of hunter gatherers began to settle down in farming settlements. They domesticated plants and animals. Gradually, their cultures became more complex. Most early civilizations grew up along rivers where people learned to work together to control floods. Rivers support the growth of civilization. It says early peoples settled where crops would grow. Crops usually grew well near rivers where water was available and regular floods made the soil rich. One region in Southwest Asia was especially well suited for farming. It lay between two rivers. The land between the rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are the most important physical features of the region, sometimes known as Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means between the rivers in Greek. As you can see on the map, the region called Mesopotamia lies between Asia Minor and the Persian Gulf. The region is part of a larger area called the Fertile Crescent, a large arc of rich or fertile farmland. The Fertile Crescent extends from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. In ancient times, Mesopotamia was actually made of two parts. Northern Mesopotamia was a plateau bordered on the north and the east by mountains. Southern Mesopotamia was a flat plain. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers flowed down from the hills into this low-lying plain. The rise of civilization. Hunter-gatherer groups first settled in Mesopotamia more than 12,000 years ago. Over time, these people learned how to plant crops to grow their own food. Every year, floods on the Tigris and Euphrates rivers brought silt, a mixture of rich soil and tiny rocks, to the land. The fertile silt made the land ideal for farming. The first farm settlements formed in Mesopotamia as early as 7,000 BC. Farmers grew wheat, barley, and other types of grain. Livestock, birds, and fish were also good sources of food. Plentiful food led to population growth and villages formed. Eventually, these early villages developed into the world's first civilization. So let's just take a look real quick at the map. Okay, you'll see this green area is known as the Fertile Crescent. Fertile means if something's fertile, like especially we're talking about soil or land, fertile means it's good for growing things. And this crescent, the Fertile Crescent, is the crescent shape. You guys probably know things that are shaped in a crescent, like a crescent moon or a crescent roll, or a banana. Like those things are shaped like a crescent. And so this whole area is called the Fertile Crescent. This place called Mesopotamia lies between two rivers, the Tigris right here and the Euphrates right here. So this area right now, if you went to this area, it is now what is called modern day Iraq. Okay, but it's not called Mesopotamia anymore. But long ago, it was known as Mesopotamia. Okay, so that's the area we're talking about. Okay, moving on. So on this next page, you're going to see some really good pictures of how how these people learned how to irrigate, and we're going to talk about what that means in just a second. So let me go ahead and read about farming and cities. It says although Mesopotamia had fertile soil, farming wasn't easy there. The region received little rain. This meant that the water levels in the Tigris and Euphrates rivers depended on how much rain fell in eastern Asia Minor, where the two rivers began. When a great amount of rain fell there, water levels got very high. Flooding destroyed crops, killed livestock, and washed away homes. When the water levels were too low, crops dried up. Farmers knew they needed a way to control the river's flow. Controlling water. To solve their problems, Mesopotamians used irrigation, a way of supplying water to an area of land. To irrigate their land, they dug out large storage basins to hold water supplies. Then they dug canals, human made waterways that connected these basins to a network of ditches. These ditches brought water to the fields. To protect their fields from flooding, farmers built up the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. These built up banks held back floodwaters even when the river levels were high. Food surpluses. Irrigation increased the amount of food farmers were able to grow. In fact, farmers could produce a food surplus or more than they needed. Farmers used irrigation to water grazing areas for cattle and sheep. As a result, Mesopotamians ate a variety of foods. Fish, meat, wheat, barley, and dates were plentiful. Because irrigation made farmers more productive, fewer people needed to farm. Some people became free to do other jobs. As a result, new occupations developed. For the first time, people became crafters, religious leaders, and government workers. The type of arrangement in which each worker specializes in a particular task or job is called a division of labor. Having people available to work on different jobs meant that society could accomplish more. Large projects such as constructing buildings and digging irrigation systems required specialized workers, managers, and organization. To complete these projects, the Mesopotamians needed structure and rules. Structure and rules could be provided by laws and government. So before I finish up, as you can see here, the irrigation. So in this picture right here, you see the river up here, and so they dug out these what's called irrigation ditches, and then you see how they sort of organize it. So the water wouldn't just flow and flood everything, but then in the following picture on the next page, you could see that they actually that's how they would grow their crops. They would kind of channel all the water to this one place. So irrigation is just like the definition says, a way of supplying water to an area. So I'm guessing most of you, if you live in a house, okay, you probably have sprinklers or something like that, something to water your lawn or your plants. So that's just called irrigation. So it's a way of supplying water to a place that needs it. Now, surplus is, like the definition says, more than you need. So, because they grew so much food, they figured out how to control the water, and also when the water was dried up, they stored it in these large ditches called basins. So in the summer months, they still had a water supply. So once they figured out how to control the water, they had more food than they needed. And so they didn't have to worry about food so much. And because they didn't have to worry about food, now they could do other jobs. Okay. And they listed the book lists out the other jobs that they could do. And so now, because not everyone's worried about getting food, you can have people building, you could have religious leaders, people working in government, all sorts of things. But you have to have a steady food supply in order to do that. And so that sort of changed everything. And because they learn how to control the water and grow crops, now they can do other things. And here's another picture I was telling you about where you see all the green area is the crops. So they were able to grow food. And because they were able to do that, other people could specialize in other jobs, such like this guy, he's making like clay pots or something like that. So this is how cities pretty much formed. People didn't have to move around anymore for food. Okay, I'll finish up. The appearance of cities. Over time, the Mesopotamian settlements grew in size and complexity. They gradually developed into cities between 4000 and 3000 BC. Despite the growth of cities, society in Mesopotamia was still based on agriculture. Most people still worked in farming jobs. However, cities were becoming important places. People traded goods there, and cities provided leaders with power bases. They were the political, religious, cultural, and economic centers of civilization. Okay, so that is section one. There's going to be some activities that go along with this. So, and then the next one we will be doing the preview for the next section is going to focus on the rise of Sumer, which was one of the first sort of city states in Mesopotamia. Okay, thank you for listening.